3 months ago, I moved into a small apartment building on the edge of town. Rent was cheap, too cheap looking back. The landlord mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that apartment 4B, the one directly above mine, had been empty for 2 years. Previous tenant just left, he said. He didn't elaborate. I didn't ask. For the first few weeks, everything was normal. Then the footsteps started. Every night, around 3 a.m., I'd hear slow, deliberate footsteps crossing the ceiling above my bedroom, back and forth, always the same path. I told myself it was pipes settling, an old building creaking. I almost believed it, until the night the footsteps stopped directly above my bed, and I heard someone whisper my name. 3 months ago, I moved into a small apartment building on the edge of town. It wasn't glamorous, a 4-story brick building from the 1960s, the kind with narrow stairwells and a lobby that always smelled faintly of old carpet. But the rent was cheap, too cheap looking back. For a 1-bedroom in that part of the city, I should have been paying almost double what they were asking. I remember the day I signed the lease. The landlord, a tired-looking man named Harold who ran the building alone, walked me through the paperwork quickly, like he wanted to get it over with. When I asked why the rent was so low, he just shrugged and said the building was old, needed updates. The owner wanted it filled. Simple business explanation. I didn't think twice about it. He mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that apartment 4B, the unit directly above mine, had been empty for 2 years. Previous tenant just left, he said. He didn't elaborate. I didn't ask. At the time, an empty apartment upstairs sounded like a bonus. Fewer neighbors, less noise. For the first few weeks, everything was normal. I unpacked, set up my furniture, started my new job across town. The building was quiet, maybe too quiet, but I told myself that was just how these older places were. No loud parties, no barking dogs, no slamming doors. I actually liked it. Then the footsteps started. It began small, a single creak above my bedroom around midnight, the kind of sound any old building makes as it settles. I didn't think anything of it, but over the next few nights, the creak became a pattern. Every night, around 3 a.m., I'd hear slow, deliberate footsteps crossing the ceiling above my bedroom. Not random, not the settling of an old structure. A path, back and forth, always the same route, always starting from what I guessed was the far wall of 4B and ending directly above my bed. I told myself it was pipes, or maybe raccoons, or some structural quirk of an old building. I almost believed it. I even joked about it to a coworker, said my apartment had a resident ghost that liked to pace at 3 a.m. She laughed. I laughed too, back then. But the footsteps didn't stop, and they didn't stay the same. Each week, they seemed heavier, more deliberate, like whoever, or whatever, was making them wanted me to know they were there. About 3 weeks in, I finally went and asked Harold about it directly. I stood in the doorway of the leasing office and asked if maybe a new tenant had moved into 4B without me knowing, or if there was some kind of maintenance happening up there at night. He got a strange look on his face, not confused, more like resigned, and told me no, 4B was still empty. Had been for 2 years. He said sometimes old pipes made sounds like footsteps, and left it at that. I remember thinking his answer came a little too fast, like he'd given it before. I let it go. What else could I do? I wasn't going to move over some late-night creaking. Then came the night the footsteps stopped directly above my bed, and I heard someone whisper my name. I sat up so fast I nearly threw my back out. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I told myself it was a dream, some half-formed thing my brain conjured between sleep cycles. That happens, right? Your mind plays tricks in that gap between sleep and waking. But the whisper had been clear, close, like someone had leaned down right next to my ear and said my name so softly it was almost tender. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat up with the lights on, staring at my bedroom door, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Nothing did. By sunrise, I'd convinced myself, again, that it was nothing. Stress from the new job, the new city, all of it catching up to me. I went about my day like normal. Coffee, work, dinner, trying to act like a functioning person who hadn't spent the night listening for ghosts. That's when I noticed the mail. slipped under my door by mistake, I figured. A letter addressed to apartment 4B. My first thought was that the mail carrier had made an error, put it in the wrong slot. I almost tossed it aside without a second glance, but something made me flip it over and check the postmark. 3 days ago. Someone was getting mail, recent mail, in an apartment that had supposedly been empty for 2 years. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe Harold was wrong. Maybe someone had moved in recently, and he simply hadn't updated his records. Landlords miss things, especially ones running an old building solo. That was the story I told myself as I climbed the stairs that evening, letter in hand, telling myself I was just being a good neighbor, returning misdelivered mail. The stairwell light on the second floor flickered as I reached it, buzzing faintly like it couldn't decide whether to stay on. Apartment 4B was at the end of the hall, directly above mine. The door looked exactly as Harold described it, untouched, a thin layer of dust along the frame. No welcome mat, no nameplate, nothing to suggest anyone lived there at all. I raised my hand to slide the letter underneath the door, and I heard breathing on the other side, slow, steady, like someone standing perfectly still, right against the door, listening to me the same way I was listening for them. I stepped back so fast I nearly fell down the stairs. I didn't wait to think it through. I went straight back to my apartment, locked the door, checked it twice, and sat with my back against it for almost an hour, the letter still crumpled in my hand. For the next several nights, the footsteps didn't stop. If anything, they intensified, heavier, more deliberate, and every night, they seemed to end a little closer to directly above my bed, like whatever was up there was slowly narrowing in on a specific spot. I started sleeping with the lights on. I started checking the lock on my door 3-4 times before bed. I even considered calling the police. But what would I have told them? That I heard footsteps in a building where footsteps are supposedly explainable? That someone whispered my name in my sleep? I knew how that would sound. On the 5th night after the letter incident, I decided I needed answers, real ones. I couldn't keep living like this, jumping at every creak, lying awake until sunrise, dreading the sound of my own name in a voice I didn't recognize. So I did something I'm still not sure was smart or reckless. I went back up to 4B, this time during the day, when the stairwell light actually worked, when the building felt less like something out of a nightmare and more like the ordinary, slightly run-down place I'd signed a lease for. The door was unlocked. I want to be clear about this part because I've replayed it in my head 100 times since. I didn't plan to go inside. I only meant to knock, maybe finally meet whoever had moved in, clear the air, get some kind of normal explanation for all of this. But when I knocked, the door drifted open on its own, just an inch, like it hadn't been latched at all. Past that inch, I could see the apartment was empty, completely empty. No furniture, no boxes, no curtains on the windows, nothing to suggest anyone had lived there in years, exactly like Harold had said, exactly like it should have looked if his story was true. Except for one thing. In the center of the living room floor, someone had written my name. Not printed, not typed, written in what looked like charcoal or ash, in handwriting that wasn't mine but felt unsettlingly familiar, like a version of my own signature I'd never seen before, the kind of thing that makes your stomach drop because some part of you almost recognizes it. I didn't go inside. Every instinct in my body told me not to cross that threshold. I shut the door as quietly as I could, went straight down to Harold's office, and asked him, really asked him this time, no more polite dancing around it, what actually happened to the last tenant in 4B. He was quiet for a long moment, long enough that I thought he wasn't going to answer at all. Then he told me the truth, or at least the version of it he was willing to share. The last tenant, a young man, had complained about the exact same things I was describing. Footsteps, whispers at night, a name written on the apartment floor that wasn't his to begin with, at least not at first. Harold said he'd brushed it off the same way he'd brushed off my complaints, told the tenant it was old pipes, nothing more. And then, one week, the complaints just stopped. Harold assumed the man had gotten used to it, or maybe just stopped noticing. It wasn't until the rent was late that he went to check on the unit. It was empty, no move-out notice, no forwarding address, none of the tenant's belongings. Rent paid in full anyway. sitting in a plain envelope on the kitchen counter, like someone had settled up before leaving for good and never looked back. Harold never filed a report. He told me, almost apologetically, that in a building this old, in a city this size, a young man moving out without notice wasn't exactly unusual, and he didn't want the hassle of an investigation that would probably go nowhere. He just relisted the apartment, lowered the rent to move it faster, and never mentioned any of it to prospective tenants unless they asked directly, the way I finally had. I moved out 3 days after that conversation. I didn't ask for my deposit back. I didn't stay long enough to properly pack. Some boxes are probably still in that apartment, as far as I know, left behind in the rush to get out before another night passed in that building. I found a new place across town, paid full market rent without complaint, and told myself the whole thing was behind me. But here's the part I haven't been able to shake, the reason I'm telling this story at all. Last week, almost 2 months after I moved out, I got a letter, no return address, postmarked from somewhere near my old apartment building. Inside was a single piece of paper, with one line written in that same unfamiliar handwriting I'd seen scrawled across the floor of 4B. Your name is next on the door. I don't know who's living in my old apartment now. I checked the building's website out of morbid curiosity, and Unit 3B, mine, is listed as available again, rent lower than what I paid. I don't know if the footsteps ever stopped, or if they simply found someone new to walk toward, someone new whose name will end up written on a floor in charcoal and ash. I haven't gone back. I don't plan to. But some nights, I still wake up around 3 a.m., and for just a moment, before I'm fully conscious, I swear I can hear something pacing, somewhere just out of reach, getting a little closer each time. If you ever move somewhere, and the rent feels a little too cheap for what you're getting, ask why. Ask more than once. And if the answer feels rehearsed, if it comes a little too fast, trust that feeling. Some buildings remember their tenants long after they're gone, and some of them are still waiting for the next name to write down.